Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to get the meeting underway. We're a few minutes behind, but apologize for that. Good morning, everyone. This is the Niagara Regional Police Services Board meeting for Thursday, March 28th. Call the meeting to order at this time. I'll go around the room. Is there anybody who has a conflict of interest or to declare this morning on any of the agenda items in the public session? I don't believe so. Seeing none, we're going to start with the minutes of the previous meeting, which is item number 54 in the agenda package. A mover and seconder, please, for that. Moved by Member Bonham, seconded by Member Steele. All in favor of the minutes? Thank you. I do have comments this morning from my report. I will begin with our tribute to our Indigenous land leaders. To begin this meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that this land is a traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work in the Niagara region today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is the home of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and this acknowledgement reminds us of the great standard of living that we enjoy in Niagara is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people who make up this community. Additional information this morning, the Special Olympics flag raising ceremony took place on March 25th in different communities across Ontario. It celebrates the Special Olympics Day. I know the police service is a major supporter of that, and I remember back even in my day, 25 years ago, I was a big part of that as well, and I think I have a T-shirt at home somewhere. Vice Chair Steele, Member Stewart, and board staff joined Deputy Chief Flynn and 40 at the Special Olympic flag raising ceremony at police headquarters, I believe was Monday. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Special Olympics movement, and local athletes from across the Niagara region, as well as throughout Ontario, will compete in the inaugural 2019 Special Olympics Invitational Youth Games that are being held in Toronto during the month of May. I would also like to announce that the State of the Region is going to take place on April the 3rd. Regional Chair Jim Bradley will be delivering his State of the Region address to the Niagara business community to highlight the accomplishments of Regional Council. This event is being held from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Scotiabank Convention Center here in Niagara Falls. I will be attending this event along with Vice Chair Steele, Members Gibson, McKendrick, and the Board Executive Director, Chief McCulloch, Deputy Chief 40, Superintendent Ash, and Inspector Giansko. Next item is the Niagara Regional Police Recruit Graduation, which will take place on April 24th. The service will be hosting the swearing-in ceremony for 8 new recruit members of the Niagara Regional Police Service. The ceremony is being held here in the community room, here at headquarters at 7 p.m., again on April 24th. Board members planning to attend this event are asked to confirm with board staff at their earliest convenience. Also to announce upcoming Police Service Board meetings. The next committee meeting will take place on Thursday, April the 11th at 8:30 a.m. here again at the community room at headquarters. And the next full board meeting will be on Thursday, April 25th at 8:30 a.m. again here in this room. So those are all the items that I have this morning. I will turn it over to Acting Chief 40.
Thank you, Chair Genzel. I'd like to provide the board with an update on a few matters, internal and external. First of all, on February 28th and March 1st, 2019, members of the Niagara Regional Police Service competed in the annual International Police Hockey Tournament held in Windsor, Ontario. The service has a long history of participating in this tournament over the years by entering both women's and men's teams. I'm happy to report that both teams were very successful at this year's tournament. The women's team went undefeated in their division and won the championship with a 5-3 victory in the final over the Ottawa Police Service. The men's team did well, but not quite as well as the women's team. They won 2 of their 3 games, and did not advance to the finals after losing to the Halton Regional Police Service. But notwithstanding that, they did well. And I'd like to congratulate them for their efforts and their achievements. Team captains of their respective teams were, for the women, Staff Sergeant Sandy Staniforth, and for the male, Staff Sergeant Paul Webb. And they have both expressed their thank you to their board for your ongoing and continued support of their respective teams. I can also advise the board that they both intend to compete in next year's tournament, which is being held in Ottawa and will be the 59th year that the tournament has taken place. With respect to incidents involving the SIU, I can tell you that on March 21st, 2018, at approximately 5 p.m., a male attended Niagara Regional Police Headquarters and spoke with the on-duty staff sergeant, reporting that he had sustained 2 fractured ribs during an altercation with police that he claimed took place in Niagara Falls on March 19th, 2018. The injury was said to have occurred during the male's arrest for the criminal offense of take motor vehicle without consent, which occurred in the midst of a family dispute. The male had complained of rib pain upon his release from custody to EMS, and they were contacted. However, he refused treatment for the injury at that time. He subsequently sought medical treatment on his own and later contacted police regarding the alleged injury. As a result of the allegation, the Special Investigation Unit was notified, and they invoked their mandate to investigate. On the heels of the investigation, Director Leparco advised the SIU investigation was being concluded, and there were no grounds for criminal charges against any of our police officers. No concerns were expressed by the SIU director in his notification letter to the chief. With respect to another SIU incident, on March 6, 2018, a voice message was received by our Professional Standards Unit from a male who alleged that he had sustained a broken knee, 4 broken ribs, and a collapsed lung when he was arrested at the Howard Johnson's Inn located in Niagara Falls on October 25, 2017. Based on the information that he provided, we were able to locate an incident number which detailed the eviction, resistance, and subsequent arrest of a male under the Trespass to Property Act. As a result of the allegation of serious injury occurring during an altercation with a police officer, the SIU was notified and they invoked their mandate. On the completion of their investigation, Director Leparco advised the SIU investigation was being concluded, and again, there were no grounds for criminal charges against any of our police officers. And again, no concerns were identified with respect to anything our officers did in the letter to our chief. I can also advise that in the reporting period, there were no fatal motor vehicle collisions in the month of February 2019, and only 1 motor vehicle collision with life-threatening injuries, and that occurred in Welland. I have a couple of items that I would like to bring to your attention that were in the news in the last reporting period. The first one is where search warrants were executed and a number of persons were arrested. And the details of that are as follows. Since December 2018, members of the service and members of the 2 district of our morality unit and members of our street crime unit have been conducting an investigation into an individual involved in drug trafficking in Niagara Falls. On February 27, 2019, members of the Morality Unit, Guns, Gangs, and Grow Unit, 2 District Street Crime Unit, and our Opioid Enforcement Unit executed 4 search warrants at 2 residences, a commercial business, and a vehicle in South Niagara Falls. 3 persons were charged in relation to the investigation, and as a result of the investigation, we seized $12,000 in cocaine and cannabis-related substances and $7,200 in currency or cash. The second incident relates to a male who was arrested following a stabbing in Niagara Falls. And the details of that are as follows. At approximately 3:15 on Sunday, March 3rd, 2019, members working in our 2 district were called to a residence in the area of Maple Street and 3rd Avenue in the city of Niagara Falls following an altercation. When officers arrived, they discovered 2 males with injuries. One male was airlifted to a hospital where he was treated for serious injuries resulting from a stab wound. The other male was taken to hospital for treatment and subsequently charged. A 54-year-old male is facing charges for aggravated assault, 2 counts of disarmed police officer, and assault resisting during his efforts to resist arrest. The third incident is an incident that received media coverage at Brock University in St. Catharines. On March 21st, 2019, at approximately 8 p.m., uniform officers from 1 district in St. Catharines responded to Brock University for a report of a shooting. The investigation determined that 2 male suspects had confronted 3 Brock students with weapons while on the campus. The 2 suspects had fled in a vehicle prior to police arriving at the scene. 3 students were located near the residence with injuries. All the victims were transported by paramedics to a local hospital where they were treated and subsequently released. This matter remains under investigation by detectives from the 1 District Criminal Investigation Branch, or commonly known as our CIB, who continue to search for the suspects involved in the incident, and early indications are that this was a targeted attack. It was not a random attack. Those conclude my updates at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully next year our men can look after Halton appropriately.
We're confident the women will repeat. We're not so confident about the men at this time.
Member Bonham.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and through you. Acting Chief Forty, my understanding is that there was some concern on behalf of the service with regard to misinformation or maybe I could put it differently, lack of information perhaps on the Brock incident. Would you care to sort of expand on that? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. One of the issues that police agencies deal with across the country is social media and the spread of misinformation in times of stress. In this particular incident, on the heels of misleading information coming out, our media relations officers, Phil Gavin and Stephanie Sabrin, engaged almost immediately to try to correct that misinformation. When something like that happens, we have a concern that the misinformation can lead to enhanced fear in the community, and also place either the community or our members in a situation where their safety is compromised. So you are correct that we had those concerns, and we have subsequently corrected that information, and our media personnel have also engaged proactively with other media agencies in discussions about trying to eliminate the potential for this to happen again in the future by putting processes in place and reminding the general public to rely on a reliable source like the police in a time of stress like that. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is a presentation from the Wainfleet Fire Service. I would ask Board Member Kevin Gibson, who is the Mayor of Wainfleet, if he would like to do the official introductions.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you. Wainfleet is currently examining the building of a new fire station, emergency services building at Chambers Corners. One of the things that we're looking at is inviting our emergency services partners to have presence in those in that building. So today we have our fire chief, Morgan Alcock, here to do a presentation to the executive to see if there is interest in having a presence in our building. So over to you, Morgan.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, as the mayor said, I mean, I guess I don't really have to say anything. He just said it all. Yeah, so that's okay. So just a bit of background. We are, as part of our review for the fire service, is looking at modernizing and professionalizing our service. And part of that was the studies that were conducted. We had a master fire plan done in 2013 and another operational review done in 2016. Both of those reviews essentially said that we should be looking at reducing the number of stations, combining them, and engaging our emergency service partners into a combined joint emergency service facility. We had a building assessment also done in 2015 that essentially said our buildings are well beyond their service life. It's time for us to be building new. Moving on, currently we operate 4 stations to the south in Burnaby, and then the middle, Marshville, Winger, and then to the north is Welland Porter Schwab. Those 4, so the 2 stations that we're talking about are in the middle, so Station 1 in Winger and Station 2 in Marshville or Wainfleet. Both of those stations, as you'll see, they're well beyond their service life. They're small. So currently Station 1, built in 1947, is a single bay concrete garage. We're at a point where, as you can see that one fire truck, we're literally inches from the door. So it's time for that station to go. Station 2, which is in Wainfleet, we have 2 trucks that operate out of this, but there's no facilities for firefighters to operate. It is shared with the library and community hall. That is used for community events. So the intent would be to kind of move away from operating that as an emergency facility and strictly for community use. At this time, we also have a Niagara EMS community response unit, an SUV that's housed out of this, but they don't actually, it's parked outside, and in the winter months, the SUV is forced to idle all day long while it sits outside to keep the medications warm and whatnot. So the intent, the proposed location is in Chambers Corners, which was identified in the master fire plan and again in the ops review. Chambers Corners is centralized to the municipality and would assist in providing coverage closer to the northeast part of the township. So years ago, the township previously owned property. The piece, and it's a little difficult to see on the screen, the piece to the east, the township had previously owned 2.4 acres. In January of 2019, the adjacent piece to the west, which was another 2.6, became available. It does have a house and a chicken barn and a pond. So the township did proceed with the purchase of that property. So we do have 5 acres for the purpose of that facility. So the intent would be, but when we combine and everything, that what you see and highlighted in the orangey red is where our increased service levels, our response times. Under the NFPA standard, we must have 6 firefighters in 14 minutes. So that's what will be delivered through the new station. Some other model facilities that are out there right now, Clearview in Ontario, that's a joint EMS station. I'm unaware if there's a community office for police in it. Another one, Cramahay in Northumberland County has done a joint emergency services facility. Also in Northumberland County is a joint one with Elnuik-Haldeman. Haggers in Haldeman, both Hagersville and Cayuga operate joint EMS and fire. They are policed by OPP, which has their own detachment. Bracebridge, they have done a similar facility. Obviously, we're not looking for something quite so grand, but it is a model facility that we can look to for ideas. So some of the steps that we've taken, obviously, I've already discussed. You know, the master fire plan. We've purchased the lands. We've engaged the regional planning departments to proceed with the zoning and official plan amendments. And we're proceeding with the budgetary items for 2019 for pre-engineering and site servicing. And then obviously for 2019 is engaging our emergency service partners. So the police services, EMS, potentially OPP, as we do have the stretch of Highway 3. And that's kind of the purpose of why we're here this morning. Some of the next steps, continuing for pre-construction, continue with our planning and amendments, demolition of the existing buildings that are on the property and get it ready for construction with the intent by 2020 shovel ready. It's aggressive, but I think it's something that is long overdue, and that's we're pushing for that with the intent possibly grand opening early 2021. So part of our review, as I said, the master fire plan and ops review said that, you know, to investigate the opportunity of a joint service facility. So I pulled this from Niagara Navigator right from the region site. And what you're seeing here is both police and EMS facilities in the region. And as you can see to the southwest, there's kind of a void or a gap in Wainfleet. And so that was kind of the basis of building the case of having at least a community office or a shared facility that would benefit the citizens of Wainfleet. So our emergency services partners, some of the questions that we have is, is the emergency services interested in shared space? If you are interested, what are the needs? Do you need vehicle-based? Do you need offices? What are the needs that would be required? As part of our design process, we need to know what those needs are, so before we engage an architect, we know what we're asking for. What are the proposed timelines? Obviously, we're kind of into 2019, so construction isn't going to happen this year, but if we can get the process, the planning done this year for 2020, 2021. And then also, if there is interest, who are the contacts that we could formalize and progress the discussions further. So our ask for the board this morning is that you direct staff to assess your service deliveries within NRP, specifically with the Southwest Niagara region, so Wainfleet, and whether or not there is a viability of an emergency service facility or shared facility. If NRP is interested, then obviously we would have to look at agreements and whatnot moving forward prior to the beginning of construction. So that concludes my brief presentation. Is there any questions?
Vice Chair Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Morgan. Morgan, with the governance issue at the top of the list of municipalities in the region of Niagara, a combined fire service is on the table. It has been talked about. As a secondary plan, do you have something in there with regards to if it becomes a regional organization no different than police? If that happens, will that be a manned 24-hour-a-day station where, because I know Wainfleet now has yourself and I think your fire prevention officer are the only two full-timers?
The deputy, yes.
And then all your volunteers. So obviously your station's not manned 24 hours now. However, on a region-wide basis, it may be. So is there a secondary plan that if that does come to fruition where the fire services in Niagara are merged, where there may be, because of the Niagara region now, operating police services, operating fire services, operating EMS, that they may want to make that a 24/7 station with all three as part of that. So I know it's a fine line to go, because if they don't go that way, you're not going to spend good money after bad. So
that's part of the driver of this, is setting Wainfleet up for the future. If regionalization happens, we have a facility that serves Wainfleet, whether the region takes it on or not. If the regionalization doesn't happen, then we still have a facility that's going to serve Wainfleet as needed. Part of the design for the fire services is we are, if it is manned 24 hours, then then we have to look at quarters, which is in the kind of the proposed fire plan now. Knowing that we might not be staffed 24-hour now, but certainly plan for that. And that's kind of setting Wainfleet up, regardless of the way regionalization goes. This facility would be what's needed.
great, thank you. So moving forward, Chair, as opposed to receiving this, should we forward it to the chief and his staff, or a committee of this board with the chief and staff to make comments on?
I know on the last page there's basically an invitational component or an ask. It certainly should be directed back to the chief, but it also needs to be assessed regarding the accommodation master plan. It was created way back in 2009, of which this building and headquarters, two district and headquarters being here. St. Catharines is still part of that, the new building in St. Catharines District 1, which is soon to get underway. And also the emergency services garage and training component, which is 2023. And if I believe in the last couple of months, we saw the forecast of that 2023 ask as part of the capital budget. So we need to look at this, and the service from the chief's perspective needs to look at this to figure out Is there a need for us as an operational, their side as an operational requirement to have an office there of some kind, or is it strictly a report writing room, or it's their call. I mean, they're the ones that are out there patrolling. My recommendation on this would be a motion from the board back to the, from us to the service, asking the chief to assess this document and report back to us, but clearly indicating how this fits into the building accommodation master plan. I think that's vital to, that's in there. I'll go to member.
Well, I was just going to say, once questions are done, I have no issue with moving in that direction. Thank you.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you for the presentation. I concur with the direction that Member Steele is going into, because I think, you know, we need to get an assessment from the service, and I'd like that assessment to look from two angles. And the first angle is, right now we have a region that's has a lot of internal borders for municipalities, and not really knowing what's going to come out. And I think it should be sometime later this year we'll get some indication of whether or not we're going to have one municipality, less municipalities, borders changing. And I think once you start, if borders have changed or some are removed, we start to look at things from a different angle. And I appreciate in your presentation, you're looking at Wainfleet and the coverage of Wainfleet. But if some borders changed along there, you might be looking at different coverage areas from a larger perspective. And so I think, although I concur seeing your pictures, that certainly upgrades are necessary for the safety and well-being of the people that live out that way. But I think I would concur and willing to move or second from Member Steele the idea that our service look at it from not only the perspective of the current configuration of Niagara, but look at it from the perspective of what may be coming down the road, looking at it from a more global perspective as to what we need. You know, we do have two police facilities with Welland, which my understanding in my time, which is about a long time on this board, is that at one time policing in Wainfleet was provided from the Welland facility a number of years ago, and then it got switched to the Port Colborne facility. And so if there's a reconfiguration out there municipally and geographically some way, are there opportunities to maybe look at some other alternatives? And I will leave that really to the service to come back. So I concur fully with getting a report back from the police perspective as to what our needs are, if any. My understanding of having even a small presence in there for some services of police, which might be closer to the residents out there, is not totally a bad idea. But to what scale that takes, and as you well know, budgets, how that goes forward. So thank you for your presentation, and I share the concerns expressed in it. Not, even though I don't live in Wainfleet or whatever, I share those concerns. But I'd like to see a report from the service on that and what the implications are. So thank you, Chair.
Member Gibson.
Okay, from my PSB chair, I concur with the process. I think that's the way we should go. And now I'm going to switch hats and put on my mayor's hat. We've already spoke with CAO, acting CAO Ron Tripp, and amalgamation or not, we are obviously in need of modern fire facilities. The region's point of view through Ron is that if it becomes part of the region or centralized fire, it doesn't matter. There's still a lot of upgrading required out there. So whether they pay the bill or we end up paying the bill, that's not really a point. There has to be a new facility there in some sense. So that's what we're doing. As we move forward on this in discussions, we decided that it would be very prudent to look 20, 30, 40 years down the road. We want to build a building for 75 years, and who knows what the population will look like at that time. And so we wanted to make sure that at this time we were able to include as many of our partner agencies as possible. So the buy-in is whatever it will be, but our ask is that you look down the road the demographics may change, and it's a great time to jump into a great location while the opportunity exists. Excuse me. Okay, PSB hat back on. Thank you.
Any other comments on this? If somebody could make a motion on, I'll go to Vice Chair Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do concur with when he has his mayor hat on. I went through this process with Port Colborne as a city councillor, so and knowing your facilities very intimately in the business I'm in, it is about time. So I'll move that we proceed to pass this to the police chief, to come back with a report from his staff with regards to the ask from Wainfleet Fire and Emergency Service and how it fits into the accommodation review.
Seconded by Member Stewart. Any other discussions on that? Show of hands in favor. Thank you. That item is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
For coming. Next item is number 56. It is 2 letters. London Police Service Board, which were sent to the Ministry of Community Safety and Corrections, and the other one went to, as is part of a consent agenda. We normally move this in block, but I do have an interest in that one. That's why I talked to that. So I need a motion to move a block of items number 56 through to 67. Moved by Member Bonham, seconded by Member McKendrick. Discussion on these items. Member Stewart, the item number, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as you do, I have a comment about item 56. The letters about hospital emergency room protocols. And I was just wondering to the service, I know that over the years we've worked out various protocols with emergency to kind of improve the handing off of patients, etc. And I'm just wondering, do we have a comparison with what London Police Services protocol is and our protocol? And if they are similar or both needing things, should we, in turn, as a service and a board, perhaps support this this letter to the ministry to improve the situation with transition of mental health patients from the police to mental health services? I'm just wondering if you could expand on that, or if you have information that will be useful as to whether or not we should be joining this or not.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the issue obviously is not unique to London. Niagara certainly, at least during both my time in operational services, having served in Superintendent White's position, is an ongoing issue and has been for a number of years now. I think the good news to report is that not unlike London's response time, Superintendent White advises we're currently at about 83 minutes. That's not bad in the grand scheme of things and where they have been in previous times. But I think that I think overall that it's a good idea that as an industry, you know, in policing, that we look to leverage each other's work. I was aware that that the chief in London was working on this issue, but I think that we can all learn from each other, and I think as an industry we probably would be well served together with our you know, our colleagues in the health system to look for ways that we can better function. I know that it's an issue on the EMS side as well in terms of having 4, 5, 6 ambulance vehicles backed up at the hospital while they're waiting for offload. So something that we need to continue to work forward.
Thank you for that. And just a little further to it, I guess what the frame I was looking at was whether or not we're better to be looking more globally at this issue as a province, since the healthcare is a driven provincially for funding and for whatever, and yet policing and EMS, as you pointed out, are dealing at a regional level for funding and support, and they've got to work together. And so I'm wondering if protocols that they have and ideas they have implemented are somewhat different? There's a new wrinkle. Do we need all kinds of different ideas? Or do we need to sort of collectively, as boards and services approach the province, to say, this is an issue for all of us, and if it needs some changes in the hospital structure that local people may not have control over, like the major budgets and all those kinds of things, that mean we need to be looking, advocating provincially to improve this situation. And having London send in a letter, but if other services that are experiencing the similar issues, you know, emergency services shouldn't be sitting there waiting for each other. I think that's, we all understand that's not a really good use of our service time and our resources. But on the hospital end, do they have the resources to take over in a more timely fashion? In other words, could we be getting there and going through the things to say, maybe that our officers are back on the road doing what they do best in a half an hour instead of being there for basically an hour and a half to 2 hours. And as a global system, are we better off? So with those things in mind, I'm looking to say, should we either be supporting this, be sending a letter about our protocols to the ministry and saying, you know, is there a way we can be standardizing something provincially to assist? So that's really my question, is of whether or not we say, oh, they're doing a nice thing there, maybe we can get an idea. But we're all operating our own little worlds then, and I think there's a piece that's provincial that we need to be looking at here. So I don't know, just respond to my babbling, but nonetheless, I see that, you know, looking at a bigger picture, there may be some solutions in the bigger picture as well.
Absolutely. No, I'm sorry. I appreciate that. I probably was just letting you know that locally we, and you're aware as a result of your years on the board, that we do experience the same issue. I think in terms of advocacy, it's probably something that that we should be doing at multiple levels. So, you know, at the board's level and to the province, as well as to continue locally with our partners, because some issues are local, some capacity issues are local, and sometimes the workarounds require a local sort of solution.
Thank you, Deputy. And I was just saying, Chair, that I'd be willing to maybe put something forward that in combination with the service and the chief and the board, that we look to some way of supporting our concerns provincially, you know, outlining the protocols we've developed, because maybe the province would like to look across a variety of protocols that are set up to try to find some common thing where maybe they could contribute to the solution provincially. So I would be prepared, if somebody will second it, to make a motion that we ask the chief and the chair to combine to respond to this.
I would certainly welcome a motion that would allow the service to outline the existing agreements that we operate under now, and then bring that back to the board. And the board can draft a letter similar to this to the two ministries, which outlines our framework here in Niagara, have that sent forward with a reference in our letter back there with the province should look at trying to develop a provincial-wide method of operation dealing with this in all hospitals, and citing the London issue. But we need to articulate what's happening here in our communication. So, okay. So moved by Member Stewart, second by Member Gibson. Member Bonham has a question.
Yes, not so much a question, but an observation. This presentation is all about mental health offloads. My sense of it is that all offloads are a problem. And so I'm wondering whether or not we should continue on with this narrow focus, in my opinion, of mental health, or we should be taking a position on hospital offloads, period, which would include this, but all others. Our people are waiting at hospitals to offload all kinds of patients, never mind mental health. And I think that's the big nugget, is the offload problem. Well, this is part of it. It's not the entirety of it.
So a friendly amendment to the motion would be to have the service look at any of the hospital offload components besides mental health, again coming back with material that we can use for a concise report and letter back to the parties to be. Member Gibson, you're in favor of that slight friend? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, my sense, regular patients taken to the hospital are generally able to be left fairly quickly in the emergency ward, where the Mental Health Act requires a much longer, obviously, commitment by the emergency services. So I agree with Board Member Bonham's comments to a point, but we can look at the whole thing for sure. But I don't personally believe that it's not, the majority of it is mental health, is what I believe. So, but you can put it all in one basket and you know, take that look at it once and see. But I think you'll find it's mostly mental health. So, thank you.
All in favor of the, we have a seconder? Yes, we do, right? Yes, okay. All. I thought that would be like a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as the mover, I'm willing to accept a friendly amendment for any it's offloading, but I would think the other probably main issue that you're referring to, it might not be mental health, but maybe if the police have apprehended someone who is injured and they may have to stay there because they're a suspect or potential arrest scenario. So there are some, but I think the mental health one seems to be the largest number. But perhaps when the service brings back the thing to us, they could include those other things that Member Bonham brought up. So as the mover, I consider that to be friendly to include all that in the report.
Okay, so both parties have agreed to that. Show of hands in favor. So that item is carried. Any other items in the consent component? Member Stewart, you still have the floor. Okay, anyone else? Member Bonham.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you. Number 59, overtime activities incurred. And on page 2, under civilian overtime, it says the main driver of civilian overtime continues to be the need to meet minimum staffing in central holding, records, and communications. For my clarification, why is there a minimum staffing requirement in records?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The minimums are not established through the collective agreement. They're minimums that are required to maintain operations.
So does that mean we need to have somebody in records 24/7, or exactly what's the nature of that requirement? Thank you.
And again, through you, Mr. Chair, CPIC is 24/7, but not all records personnel are required to work 24/7. There are sections within records that we do require 24/7, though.
Thank you for that. Further, when we went through the force report, I wasn't noting that many civilian positions are not at the required numbers. So I'm curious as to what the main reason is for our inability to meet the minimums in these areas. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if I understand your question correctly, you're wondering, as an example, why we are struggling to meet the minimums in, say, communications, as an example?
Yes, for clarification, if the force report indicates we have the number of people we feel we need, then why are we struggling to meet minimum deployments? Thank you.
So there's a number of reasons we have vacancies. To start, we have vacancies right now because we're in a job freeze because we had elimination. So the minute the budget was prepared, we went into a job freeze. But even before that, we had vacancies because we've had a number of turnovers. Our civilians are retiring. Now is at the point where we have a real increase in civilian retirements. So we have already vacancies there, and we have to go through the posting process for each of those jobs. So we have vacancies. Records and seems to be the one that gets hit the most when we have vacancies because people tend to go out there and act in other positions. So that's why they would have the vacancies. On top of that is attendance management, so illness, sickness, when people call in sick at the last minute, and we have to fill them with overtime. But we do have a lot of vacancies in the organization because we have had a lot of turnover. We've had a lot of job postings. Internal postings lead to other vacancies, and it just is a ripple effect. And now we're in a freeze, so we cannot post any jobs that are band 6 or below. We cannot fill them right now, and then we're using temps.
So this reorganization that's prompting the hiring freeze, is there an end in sight to that as to when we're going to settle out in terms of the final organizational configuration and then apply the appropriate manpower to minimize the, I understand your main driver here for overtime?
So the freeze won't probably be off until at least maybe 6 to 8 weeks because we have processes we need to go through because of the collective agreement. And then we continue to experience a significant number of retirements right now. We're having at least a month of civilians retiring at this point. So we do, those vacancies lead to other people applying for jobs, and then those become vacancies. So I'm hoping in a year we'll be able to stabilize out, but right now we have a lot of movement going on in the service.
Thank you.
Any other questions on any of the other consent items? Sorry, Member Bonham.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at number 67, which is annual report of informants and agents. And I note the number that we paid out. That's on page 1, Chair, under financial considerations. And I'm just wondering, do we do any kind of an assessment in terms of value for money? Like, are we getting a kick for our dollars spent here, or does somebody look at that, or how do we measure the worth of doing this? Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair. So we have become, over the past number of years, more aligned with our policing partners across the province as we move towards a central system in terms of confidential information that's coming in. So we have a detective sergeant who works out of our intelligence office who assesses sort of as a first level assessment of the value of information, which isn't always aligned with the payoff individually from an investigation, but sometimes there's other pieces, you know, without going too in depth. So we have one central point for any officer who works through a confidential informant that it comes to. That recommendation is made in relation to what that experienced detective sergeant believes the information, the value of the information, based on you know, a number of factors. That recommendation is then made to me for final approval in every instance.
Thank you for that. What I was getting at is, does somebody take a measure of, we get data in, and timely data in my mind would be information. And we use that information for a purpose to move prosecutions or whatever forward. Do we make an assessment of what successes and failures we have with this information that we pay for? You know, is there somebody saying, yeah, we should have done that, or we shouldn't have done that, or you know, whatever? Is there some feedback loop whereby we make an assessment on an annual basis as to how effectively we're spending this money? Thank you.
No, sir. I think that the assessment that is typically made and probably at a much more basic level, given the confidentiality of a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, is in relation to the impact that information had in terms simply of the success of a police investigation and perhaps the eradication of an issue that is a community problem in most cases.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is exactly what I'm getting at. There's an assessment made of how worthwhile the expenditure was with regard to the outcomes. You know, intentions are great, but outcomes are what counts, right? So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other items, Member Bonham?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, anything else? I've got two here. Item number 57, which is the report back from, or the letter back from the acting CAO, Ron Tripp. I just wanted to outline that I appreciate this and the clarity that the region is not considering changing our registration processes for the adult entertainment. But more importantly, can someone comment from the service side as to whether we're on target for the handover, which I believe is still scheduled for July 1st?
We're still on track, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And the next one is item number 62. That is the FOI report back for the year. I'm not concerned as much of the numbers, but there's no reference in here. Are we meeting the time requirements of FOI? So when someone makes a request, is it being delivered back to them in a timely manner?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We are 96% compliant.
Okay. Just in the future, then maybe some line could be added to this yearly report indicating the time compliant, because I think that's very important. I've known in my past life some agencies that are like 50% in compliance, and it's good to hear that number from us.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else. I don't see anything else from any other board members. We do have a mover and seconder. Yes, we do. All in favor of the consent component? Thank you very much. This now moves on to new business. Our next item is number 68. This is the Comprehensive Ontario Police Act, which received, I think, royal assent in the last 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken. I will also point out that the Ontario Association of Police Services Board conference that is coming up in May will spend a considerable amount of time dealing with the new act. But there is a report here, I think both from OAPSB and also the OACP, that talks in detail of a number of the changes in the proposal. There's also another document in here as part of AMO. Besides the act, which will be available on e-laws if it's not there already, it's something that, again, it needs to be carefully reviewed. Regarding royal assent, I'm going to assume that the actual effective date of this still has not been set, that I'm aware of. So unless through the service side you know the actual effective date of the act?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for clarification, the act received passed its third reading. It is now going to receive royal assent as the next step in the process, and we anticipate that the regulations could be in place January 1st.
Okay, so January 1st is the target.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. We need a mover and seconder for this item to be put on the floor. It's a receive for information. Moved by Member Steele, seconded by Member Stewart. Any discussion or questions on this item? As I said, it will be a topic at the Ontario Police Services Board's conference coming up in May. Show of hands in favor. Thank you. Item number 69 is a request for the bridge dedication signage for Constable DeSimone. If I'm not mistaken, his picture does hang on our wall there. I remember this, I wasn't here, I wasn't living in Niagara at the time, but I was in Toronto at the time, and I remember this incident quite a bit. But anyway, a mover and seconder, the motion means that the board authorizes the use of the NRP name and logo for a dedicated tribute to the fallen officer, Constable Desmone, in accordance with the Highway Memorial and Fallen Police Officers Act of 2002. Moved by Member Gibson, seconded by Member Gale. Any discussion on the item? Member Gale.
Yeah, I just want to compliment Damien. He's not here, is he? No, I thought Damien Parent might come in, because we both worked that night together. We were working on the same shift together, and that started off as a fun night. On Thursday nights, Niagara Falls used to be, everybody came down to Queen Street and hung along Queen Street, and then they started the circle. I'm showing my age, but there used to be an A&W Lundy's Lane. Started at Rosberg's, went to A&W and came back and circled like every city does. And the kids used to hang around on Thursday night, and it got out of hand. And then we brought cruisers in. I was in the dispatch room when it happened. We brought cruisers in from all areas. And 2 cruisers were coming from Fort Erie. First one hit the truck. And I remember Norm Jeffries behind him, coming up behind him. There was, like, I'm real proud of how this went down, but I'm glad that Damien brought it up too. I thought they had already named that bridge for him, though. Okay, well, that's a good move. So I support that. Thank you.
Any other comments on that? Show of hands in favor? Thank you. Item number 70 is a special fund request, a cross-border tug-of-war competition. It's a request for $1,000. A mover and seconder, please. Moved by Member Gibson, seconded by Vice Chair Steele. Any comments or questions on this item? Member Bonham.
Noting on page 2, Chair, that this request is an increase from previous years. I'm just wondering what our history has been.
Oh, sorry. It's on the agenda cover page. The 2004 was 250, 2005 300, 2006 250, 2007 to 9 it went to 300, and between 2010 and 2018 it was 500.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a mover and seconder? We have a mover and seconder. Oh, sorry. Show of hands in favor? Thank you very much. That item is carried. There's a block of in-camera reports. It's C38 through C41. I would like to move that in block. Those are report backs from SIU to become public. I could have a mover and seconder to move that in block. Member Bonham, seconded by Member McKendrick. Any discussions on the SIU items coming forward in block? Member Gale.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Acting Chief. Is this the way these are going to be reported now? Because it seems like a lot of stuff you're coming back to us on this, saying that they qualify. Example, powers arrest upon review is termed the officers were fully compliant. Then it goes on with all the things compliant. This is different than we used to have it. More or less, and I'm not going to complain about too much information, but we seem to have the same things. Would it be easier to just say that this met all our criteria or whatever it is? And this is just a small point. It just seems like we've never had reports like this that on every one saying that compliant in this, compliant in that, compliant in this. I'll defer to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. It may seem a little bit redundant as you go through, but that report itself is meant to not only inform the board, but once it becomes public, it's available to the public as what we commonly refer to as a Section 11 investigation. So anytime the SIU is notified of an incident, it compels the chief to cause an investigation into it, respecting the SIU's lead, of course. But our investigation focuses on the conduct of the police officer, services provided, and the policies of the service. So what you see there is an assessment of the policies that were applicable or in play with respect to that particular incident, and a finding that there were either issues or no issues with respect to those policies to be compliant with the regulation. In certain cases, different policies will come into play, and you'll see that. Ones that generally relate to an application of force where there may be an injury, then certainly you would see a reference that the conduct and the incident was looked at through the lens of the use of force policies of the service and a finding whether or not there were issues. We could shorten it, but it may be wise to leave it just to be fully transparent with the public.
Okay, and thank you for that, and through you, Chair, again, but, and more information is always better, don't get me wrong. It's just that it caused me to look back at this and wonder, okay, what happened here? Example, the first one goes on about search and seizure, persons in custody. I thought nobody was in custody. So what's going on here? It caused me to look back. I look at, I'm nitpicking here, but I'm just saying we never had this before, and everyone has everything there. And if the public looked at this, I wonder if they are just looking and saying, hey, I wonder if there was a problem, they had to investigate this and this and this. But I'll defer to your expertise on this, because obviously you did it for a reason, but we never had it before. I thought it might have been some rules now in Ontario Police that you have to show that they met all the qualifications, because everyone says the same thing. Like officer note-taking, there was no question about it. Yet we have in there that they met all the criteria. So it caused me to look at it and say, whoa, but I'll defer to you on this. Thank you.
No, you raise a valid point, and we've approached this just different ways in the past. At one point, there was a lengthy description, and then that was replaced with a chart. So it became exception reporting. So the policies were listed, was there an issue, yes or no, and it moved on from there. We had that, and now we've transitioned to this. So I'll speak with Inspector Woods, and we can review that piece.
Just before we get too deep, our executive director has some background on this. It might be helpful to clear the air and also set why the criteria and how this report is outlined.
Well, yeah, sorry, and thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make you aware that this is a standard reporting practice. It's not new. I think it's been a while since we've had some Section 11 reports reported back on public, and maybe that's why it hasn't been on a public agenda. But typically what happens is a service does a service report. It comes to the board in closed session. As you know, the board considers it, then it's the board's makes the decision as to whether or not the item is to be reported back out in public, and that's what this is the closed session item coming back in public. But our reporting and what we do is very standard, if I could say that, with other Big 12 police services in how the service comes forward, makes a confidential report, the board decides whether or not that information should be released to the public. If so, then it's placed on the in-camera report backs at the next public meeting. And that's the way we've done that as far as I can remember.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Never mind then. Please don't waste your time on it, because if it fits this, I just don't want you to waste your time on it if it's not necessary, based on what Deb just said. So just to cause me to look back at it and wonder, why is this here? So thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the public component, unless there's any additional information that any board members have or requests from the service at this point in time in public. If not, then we will adjourn the public session for 15 minutes or so and then start up in the confidential session. So thank you and good morning.